Rabbi Mordecai describes the Dagaton people, the Jewish nomadic tribe, and says that they resemble these people. So if you look at these people, you can see these people are clearly uh, of what people think of when they think of black. It's like African.
So, just want to make sure we legally post to say that this is not our video. We're just doing this for teaching and news reporting and scholarship and research. So this is even criticism as well to comment on those things. So these are the things that we're doing and using these videos for. So most of these videos are not ours unless we say it directly. All right. So next. So this is one of the videos I think is very informative. This is he's, black guy, but he's a black Jew. And he's actually teaching Jewish people about African American history. So Black History Month's coming up. And he's doing it at this congregation, B'nai Israel of St. Petersburg. And he's basically going through black history from Jewish standpoint, let's say Jewish. Because he talks a lot about the black Jews, and the black Jews, that's a religion and a people, right? So they're here in America, and but as we showed with Capers Funnye, their leader, he talks about converting and halakha, and that's some of the things that we're talking about with the Limba tribe and some of our sessions that we're going to be pushing some of those videos out so people can understand, do we need to convert? There's a recircumcision and stuff that's required. And, are we trying to be Jewish? Are we trying to be Israelites? What are we supposed to be? We say that we're Messianic from a religious standpoint because we believe in the Messiah. Like we try to believe like the original disciples did. But we, as a ethnicity, we're Israelites, right? So people get confused with the Black Hebrew Israelites, which is both a movement as well, but they're also a type of belief. But we're Hebrew Israelites, or just Israelites. That's an ethnicity, right? You got Muslim Israelites. We showed a couple of weeks ago about all the different Christian Israelites, all these different people that have the identity from a ethnicity standpoint, but that doesn't mean all our beliefs are the same. So just want to make sure that's clear. So he's going to go through some of the history. I mean, he's going to talk about, now he's talking to Jewish people, right? That's mostly, European in persuasion, and that they're interested in our history. So I'm just like, times I'm like, what in the world is going on? I'm baffled because I'm like, he's teaching people that not even coming from this background, at least from a racial standpoint, but they are interested in learning about us. But our own black churches, we can't even sit down and even have a conversation, right? Like, why is this so like a negative thing in our communities where other communities, even European communities, are eating this stuff up, right? They write books about us. I'm talking about not just African Israelites, but African American Israelites as well, which I'll call us. They're writing books about us, and we don't even know what's going on. And there's some political stuff that's coming up against us right now, and we don't even have a clue what's happening. So there's a reason why we're getting persecuted, and where different countries are saying African Americans are the worst, haters of certain people, and most of us don't even know what's going on. Don't even know anything about any of this. So I wanted to show this so, once again, you can hear it from other people and you can hear the same stuff. And it's very key to hear some of the important names, dates, places, tribes. It's very important because I'll follow up with some more of this. And then when we show some of the other information about some of these tribes and stuff in the future, you'll know why. So sometimes people say, oh, that video was so boring. They just talk about a lot of history. Not this one, but some of the other ones we might show in the future. But there's a reason why we're showing you this, because this is your people. This is how you're an Israelite, right? So you need to take the time to, listen and to learn why this information is available before stuff gets start pulling down from the internet and all the other stuff that's happening. All right. So I'll be quiet and let you. I'll interject every now and then, but I'll tell my wife to put a pause on it when we do. All right.
Hello. Today I'm going to do a presentation for Black History Month for Congregation B'nai Israel. My name is Jamal Stafford. For those of you who don't know, for everybody else, hello from virtual world. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation and get started right away. Today the mantra is brevity. So I don't want it to be too long since we're not interacting, engaging either live on Zoom, and it's pre-recorded. So I'll pull this up and get right to it. All right, so here we go. And our title, Prominent Blacks and Black Jews, Introduction to some Novel Black Jewish History. So this is history that maybe you've heard of, but maybe you haven't. I'll ask a question right from the start. Where's the country of Black located? If anyone has already thought no such country exists, you're correct. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about Black History Month, the miseducation process, mislabeling process, which has occurred in this country, in North America. In other places, of course, but more predominantly in America. When we're talking about Black people and Black History Month, we're talking about the descendants of Africans who were brought here by the European colonial powers who were engaging in the transatlantic slave trade. And of course, there's some rare exceptions. There were Africans who came here before the transatlantic slave trade. And this is a news flash. Christopher Columbus didn't discover America. If he discovered America, I discovered St. Petersburg.
Pause.
But the truth is that there were many different groups of people.
And that's important. So the whole story is Columbus came here in 1492. That's very important to understand because there was a lot of stuff that was going on with the slave trade, with Black Portuguese or Black Jews leaving from Spain and Portugal going into Africa. There was the Muslims that was kicking some of the Black Jews out of North Africa to push them down to the sub-Saharan. So there's a lot of stuff that happened in that 1942. And I like the fact that he says, there's no Black, right, country or nation. If people, that's the reason why it's so important for us to do our genealogy, why we do workshops, why other people, as we saw, are also doing workshops with before beyond slavery. So this is important for you to understand your own heritage. Where do your people come from? Just saying they coming off a boat, they came from many different countries, many different tribes off boats, slave ships. So you need to understand what tribe to understand how to track your people back. All right.
Who came and traveled here. Also, of course, the natives who lived here for thousands of years. And so Africans were among the seafarers and travelers who ended up coming here before Christopher Columbus. And so it's a little bit insane that in 2021, there's adults that still believe Christopher Columbus discovered America, but I'm digressing. So when we're talking about Black History Month, we're talking about the descendants of Africans. It's just difficult to say descendants of Nigerians or people from Ghana or people from Zambia, because in America, unlike the Caribbean and Brazil, the slaves and the slave master relationship was very different. The slave masters allowed for the slaves to keep their connection to their ancestral homelands and their traditions and even their languages in a lot of cases in the Caribbean and in Brazil. But that wasn't the case so much in America. Everything was completely stripped away. Christianity was given for the most part. So this is what we're talking about. However, because of the shared experience of Africans and descendants of Africans in this country, it's like something like this. Like if you're gonna call me black and you're not gonna let me be anything else, even if I try to say I'm an American or I'm Nigerian or I'm French or whatever I want to identify as, if the American society is not gonna let me be anything else except for black, my application is black, my birth certificate is black. If everything I try to do, you turn around and say I'm black, well then guess what? Okay, I'm black and I'm proud. And this is kind of what occurred naturally amongst the descendants of Africans. So we identify as black and we know what we're talking about. We're not talking about the color in a crayon box. We're talking about people, particularly people who descended from Africa. And again, there's rare exceptions of people who were not descendants of slaves and were indeed still from Africa. Um, so to go through some history, I'm going to start way back in ancient times and speak about the Israelites going into Africa, at least as it was mentioned by Mar Zutra in the Talmud. So it states in the Bavli in Sanhedrin 94a, to where were the tribes of Israel exiled? And Mar Zutra answers, to Africa. And there's a couple of other sources that are basically repeating this verbatim. This is, of course, a part of the story of the Ethiopians, a part of the story of the Igbo, the Jews of Nigerian ancestry. This is a part of the story of the South African Lemba tribe Jews, whose genetics have since been linked to the Levant region, meaning their origin is not of the South African region, but it's of Middle Eastern region. Which is a part of their story. They say that their ancestors came from Israel and migrated down to South Africa. And among the Lemba tribe in South Africa, you have some who have been tested to have similar genetics to the Kohanim that are found amongst Ashkenazim and Sephardim and Yemenite Jews. And so there's even a genetic link there. And of course, everybody knows of the Ethiopian Jews of Beta Israel, who for the large part have all migrated to Israel. There's still a couple, or maybe a few thousand left in Ethiopia. So this is an ancient attestation of Israelites going into Africa. And I'm going to make the connection to modern day African Americans who have connected to Judaism with this story in mind. Of the heritage of West African Jews or Jews from the continent of Africa, apart from the Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews who ended up there as well. So there's this account called Tariq al-Sudan, it's dated to the 1650s. And in it, and this is a copy of it here, in it, it describes this man named Zua Aliman coming from Yemen and settling in the Kukia region, which is the Songhai Empire, which was basically a large portion of West Africa. Excuse me. In fact, this man's name, Zua Aliman, means he came from Yemen. This document, it describes this community called Bani Israel that in the 1400s existed in this area, Tindirma, which is modern day Mali, and that they possessed 333 wells and they had 7 leaders. And if you look at the names, these names read like Arabic versions of Hebrew names. Jabrut ben Hashim. As soon as I read Jabrut, I just thought of the word Havruta, but in any case, there, of course, we all know Arabic and Hebrew are very similar. Rabbi Sadia Gaon said, for example, if you want to know how to learn the Hebrew alphabet, learn the Arabic alphabet. So this is a early attestation of Jews in West Africa and Mali. And this YouTube video, which is not, I'm not going to play it, but if you want to see it, I could send you the link. Is done by a gentleman by the name of Ehav Ever, who I actually have communicated with on multiple occasions. We corresponded back and forth through Messenger for a couple of months, talking about Judaism, about Israel, about the IDF. He served in the IDF. He actually was he's an African American in his upbringing, but as he got older, he also reconnected to his roots. Found his grandfather's heritage to be of these West African Jews, and then his grandmother also. There were some like Spanish Sephardic Jews there. So it was this mix of Yemenite, West African, and Sephardi Spanish Jewish heritage in his lineage. So he reconnected to that, and he eventually went through the process of Gior, and has since went and served in the IDF, and lives in Israel. He lives in a Yemenite community, and I actually have a personal friend of mine that knows him personally, and they speak, and so they know each other personally. And my friend has basically explained to me about this gentleman here, and so I watched the video, and it's very interesting, and it basically talks about this document, because the gentleman Ehav Ever is actually able to read it. He can read Arabic and in Hebrew, and so it's just interesting piece of history. And this is him, Ahav davening. There's this book called The Jews of a Saharan Oasis. And so right now we're at the 14 to 1600s. I'm going to get to this rabbi here and go backwards a little bit in time, but we'll just keep going. So there's this book called Jews of a Saharan Oasis, Elimination of a Tamantit Community, not to be confused with Temani, like Yemenite, but Tamantit, it was a region in like South Central Algeria. It was written by a man named John Hunwick, and he states in the book, Scottish explorer Mungo Park traveled through West Africa in the late 1700s and was informed by an Arab man of many Arabic-speaking Jews in Timbuktu. Timbuktu is, of course, like Mali, West Africa, and their prayers were similar to the Moors. If anybody knows about the Moors, you know there were a mix of Berbers, so indigenous North African Berbers, Arabs, and Black Africans from like Sudan or Egypt, Ethiopia, going up north to Sudan and Nubia, up to Egypt, and they made up a bulk of what's considered the Moors. And in history, it's been said about the Sephardic Jews and the Moors that they lived so closely together that you could quite often be speaking about a Jew when using the term Moor. And so this Scottish explorer kind of gives an attestation to the closeness of the communities there, of the Arabic-speaking Jews in Timbuktu and the Moors, whose prayers were similar. The next item here on the presentation. Now we're skipping to the 1800s as far as the time period of this rabbi. Rabbi Mordechai Abi Sorar, who writes in French this document where he's speaking about his community and he's speaking about the communities there in West Africa. And this is said to be the last rabbi of Timbuktu, who lived in the 1800s. He writes in this document about the Jewish communities there, and he said that they've been there since the 7th century. So this is going back to the 600s, that Jews were in West Africa. And of course, we know with Jews, when they go, whether it's by force or by choice, in exile into other regions of the world, of course they maintain their heritage and their culture within the communities, but they also absorb native populations. And this is really the only way to explain how, if anybody asks you today, what does a Jew look like? Nobody could say what a Jew looks like, because there is no Jewish look. You have Jews today who look like Europeans. You have Jews today that look like Arabs. You have Jews today that look like Africans. You have Jews today who look like people from India. You have Jews today who look like Chinese people, because everywhere Jews went, they absorbed into the native populations or absorbed the native populations into their communities and married them and converted them. And so in same with in Yemen, you have Jews who look like people from Yemen. And so obviously, at some point that stopped, and then you had practices like endogamy, for example, where they only married within each other to maintain some type of ethnic purity or some type of continuity within just marrying other Jews. And this is, of course, due to how you view halakha. And also external factors, like Jews in European countries, for example, maybe weren't able to engage with the society outside, while Jews in certain Arabic countries maybe were more prone to mingle with the outside world, outside of the Jewish community. And of course, those are just general statements that don't always apply in either place. But the point is is that this rabbi here speaks about the Jews who lived in West Africa, going all the way back to the 7th century. And so, of course, you would recognize over time that the population of Jews would start to take on the characteristics of the native population over time, such as a period of time that they were there. And so this is a picture of his house, and it's his house, and it was the synagogue. And so Rabbi Mordecai, he describes the Dugatun people, who, by all accounts, all historians, academic research would suggest that the Dugatun people were a Jewish nomadic tribe, meaning they were Jewish in origin. But over time, they eventually were either forcibly converted to Islam, or maybe cultural factors. Some of them just chose Islam, but they eventually became Muslim nominally. And so today you have the Anusim.
So this Dugatun tribe is very important. So that's what I was talking about. We might follow up with another video just talking about Dugatun. It might not be as lively or entertaining, but it will give you a lot of facts to understand who those tribes are and how they're connected. So you'll know your connection as well. All right. So, listen to what he says around you. He's saying that this guy, I don't use the R word there, but the what's his name? Maduri al Sharar. But he is coming to this community, and he's then identifying these African Israelites, so as he calls them, African Jews. So remember, there was 10 tribes, as we talked about before, that the Talmud talks about. Even their book talks about went to Africa, right? So these are some of the populations of some of these people, and then even some of them migrated after 70 AD. They actually went through East Africa to West Africa as well. All right. So that's very important to understand that Dugatun. All right.
Of Mali, of West Africa. And now some of them are reconnecting to their heritage as well. And this is actually touched on in this video by Ehavever, the Anusim of Mali. But this community of Jews are spoken about by Rabbi Mordecai Abi. And he talks about the Dugatun people. And what's more interesting is that he says that these people who lived in tents resemble the Berber Taroigs. These are two pictures of Berber Taroigs, and they're called that because of the Taroig. It's supposed to be a word that signifies the blue tint of their skin. And their skin actually has this bluish tint to it because of the dye that they wear every day. They are very into creating garments that are made out of this beautiful blue colored dye, and it eventually affects their skin. Rabbi Mordecai describes the Dugatun people, the Jewish nomadic tribe, and says that they resemble these people. So if you look at these people, you can see these people are clearly of what people think of when they think of black. It's like African, and I don't mean transplants. I mean,
and just to let you know that these people right here, they live in, these are not saying that they are Jews. He's comparing them to what the African Jews look like. And these people say that they are the ancient Philistines. So they have the Israelites, which I'll talk a little bit after this is over, but that they live among them, and that they kind of treat as a lower class of people. Just to let you know what he's talking about in reference to this. All right.
To the region. And that's just an interesting fact. This word here, kel tamashek, is what these people, the Tuaregs, call themselves. So that was just a note I put for myself. Anyway, he goes on to say that they, meaning the Dugatun, the Jewish nomadic tribe, that they are fairer in skin complexion than the generality of African Jews. So he goes on to say that these West African Jews are even lighter than the other African Jews that exist. And so if these people here, if they resemble these people, are lighter than the other African Jews, you can imagine the melanin count of these other African Jews that Rabbi Mordecai is describing. And one thing I want to state is this presentation is not for the sake of emphasizing skin color. Skin color is just affected by the amount of melanin you have in your skin or lack thereof. That has nothing to do with a person's essence, their soul, their character, nothing. But it's also important to note because it's a part of who a person is. It's when people say I don't see color, it just immediately smacks of being disingenuous because it's basically say you don't see this person standing right in front of you. And one other quick note I wanted to make is that all human beings are people of color. My skin has a particular skin tone, but also the people who are thought of as white, that's their skin color. Their skin has a particular pigmentation. And the reason why that's important for talking about Black History Month is because of these terms black and white and how they're used as weapons in America. Anything we can do to break down the barriers of these ammunition that we use these color codes for is helpful. And so I think it's helpful to point out that it's okay to say I'm a Black man because I know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a group of people who descend from Africa who live in the country of America. And because of external forces, we've come to identify with this term. White people also should feel comfortable to say, yeah, I'm white. I'm not going to say should. This is just my opinion. But it's to say that if you're identifying with the shade of tone of your skin, that's one thing. But also, it's to say like our ancestors come from Europe, and so that's just it shouldn't be used as a weapon. Is really all I'm trying to say. And going back to Rabbi Mordecai when he points out the resemblance factor of the Dogaton Jews with the Tuareg, it's just interesting that he makes that note as well. The next, or we're gonna skip to the 1800s, further into the 1800s, 1897. So there's this newspaper article which I have seen a scanned copy of it, but there's so many questions that came up when I read the content of the article. I just thought, what in the world's going on? So anyway, I'll just read it, and the link to the article is here if anybody wants it as well. The title of this link is basically saying educated African Jewish man who is conceptually confusing to Americans. But the title of the article is Negro who can't write who can write Hebrew. And it's dated September 20th, 1897. I'm not going to read the whole article. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. And again, this is from 1897, and I'm building throughout time to connect to the modern day. It says a young African Negro has been in the city for the last few days who claims to be a Hebrew. He writes in Hebrew very rapidly. The Negro was sent to one of the rabbis of Hartford who's perfectly satisfied that he's a Hebrew. So he had a rabbi who verified, okay, yeah, this man is a Jew.
Hold up a minute.
He said,
and not only did we have the original article, so I mean we have the article, but it didn't just say he wrote Hebrew. He wrote ancient Hebrew, and it was known to be written that way and spoken in West Africa. So this is in the late 1800s. Our people were speaking a ancient Hebrew in West Africa that they say now, if you go to Lashon Kodesh, they say that it's no longer a spoken language, that it was been, the pronunciation and the words has been lost for, I think thousands of years, I think that they will even say. But this is in the late 1800s, and this paper in Connecticut is saying that these people from West Africa wrote this boy who was mute. He was mute and he couldn't speak, or he was deaf and mute, but he was writing in ancient Hebrew back then. So this is showing you that how our language is connected to that. So even the Ewe people, if you go to some of our past interviews with our sister Sarum, she talks about how even their language is rooted in West Africa to ancient Hebrew as well. And she shows you, right, how it's connected to their language as well. So it's easy to connect these things, but the question is, why hasn't our community, why hasn't our scholars, why have our ministers, our pastors, our professors have done this, right? All right.
He came from a large town in Africa. Sorry, typos. Where there's a tribe of about 20,000 Black Hebrews who speak Lashon Kodesh and are quite prosperous. He says his people not only write Lashon Kodesh, but it's their speaking language. So they not only write this, but they speak it as their native language. So already I'm starting to think, what's going on?
He says it there.
What surprises him, he writes, is that no other Jew, no Hebrew, no other Jews know of his countrymen in Africa. And we've heard, if you ever watched any documentaries of Beta Israel, the Ethiopians, they kind of had that same sentiment. Except the opposite. They were just like, we didn't know there were other Jews. We only thought we were Jewish. So they saw Ashkenazi Jew, somebody with fair skin. They just didn't believe that they were really Jewish because all they were used to was seeing Black Jews. And so it's interesting this news article had recorded this incident, but I'm wondering, what country did he come from? Where did these 20,000 African Jews go? Did he come into contact with the Jewish community when he was here in America? And I wonder, would he have been accepted widely back then? It's the 1800s. Would he have been accepted in the Black community, for all that matter, for being a Jew? Like, he couldn't speak English, he was speaking Hebrew. Maybe they thought, who is this guy? He's crazy. But those are just questions I had. And so all of that is to say that there are Black people in America who are desiring to reconnect to this heritage, which was once thriving, which was known, but either through Muslim conquest or colonialism or the transatlantic slave trade, all that heritage was stripped away, and the descendants of African Jews, there's no way to know for sure who is actually descended from that place. But there are Black people in America who feel that connection to Judaism and know about this history, and they want to reconnect to their heritage and their perceived heritage, to say, this is where my family came from. My family came from West Africa. Maybe this is where my ancestors came from. And so they reconnect to Judaism, and that's kind of like a doorway to kind of open them up, to make them feel a little more at home. At times it's not easy for converts. And so anything a convert can do to feel that connection and feel like a reduction of imposter syndrome, I think all converts go through that on some level, whether it's small or large. But in any case, these Black Jews that I'm going to talk about now actually had interactions with the Black community in America. So that's really the point of the presentation. At this point, we're at the early 1900s. And Marcus Garvey, this is one of the prominent Black figures in America, especially when we think of Black History Month, we think about Martin Luther King Jr., we think about Malcolm X, we think about George Washington Carver, we think about Sojourner Truth, we think about Rosa Parks, Nat Turner, Muhammad Ali, all these figures we think about. But Marcus Garvey is probably among the top figures that Black Americans across the country think about, because of his push for being strong in your pride about being not just Black, but African, returning back to this essence of being African and reconnecting to the land, or the heritage, the traditions, the principles that are taught there. There's different African proverbs, and even going so far as saying, we're going to leave America and go back to Africa. And he was a big proponent of that. And so a lot of African Americans ended up following suit and going to Africa. A lot of his ideals were taken to fuel the Rastafarian movement in Jamaica. He was Jamaican, and he was from Jamaica, and the organization that he started and founded was founded in Jamaica in 1914. And then he took it and started a chapter in New York with this gentleman here, who is, believe it or not, a rabbi. A majority of the information about him comes from this website, blackjews.org. There's a board of rabbis that facilitate this organization in these communities that are all throughout New York and Philadelphia, Chicago. One of the most well-known rabbis is, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of him, Rabbi Capers Funnye, who was the first cousin of Michelle Obama.
So that's what I was talking about earlier is Funnye, Capers Funnye, right? So he's, like you said, Michelle Obama's first cousin, and he's known as the chief black Jew or something like that for around the world. And but that's the one I was telling you that there was a split, from my understanding, between after this period between those who call themselves Black Hebrew Israelites and those who call themselves Black Jews, or Hebrew Israelites and Black Jews, because some of them want to identify more with the Israelite, and the other ones were more connected to the Judaism, the Halakha, the conversion, converting yourself over to Judaism to be accepted. And other ones we're talking about is our heritage, our race, but some of them went to the extreme as well. So just so you can understand this period, a lot of people will talk about that this is when the Black Hebrew Israelite stuff started, and that's definitely wrong. It happened way, as you saw, even in the late 1800s. You saw people from Africa saying that African Americans are connected to them and they can read and write and speak ancient Hebrew. So even look through slavery, through Nat Turner and some of the people who they read the Bible and they woke up, or they were limited to reading the Bible through the slave Bible, and they ripped out certain parts of the Bible so they couldn't identify with the uprisings, or like Denmark Vesey, who said that we are the new Israelites, and that's the same church down in South Carolina got shot up by a young white man. It's the same church that had some of that history there. So there's a lot more older connections than this, but this is very important to understand where we are even today. All right.
As his congregation in Chicago, which welcomes Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardic Jews, B'nai Anusim, any level of observance, and it's a thriving community. So Rabbi Capers Funnye is also associated with Black Jews, but I have a couple of friends who were a part of communities in this organization as well, and so they kind of attested to me that the information that they're putting on their website is valid, at least from the perspective of their historians in their communities. Rabbi Josiah Ford was born in Barbados and was born in 1877 and died April 23rd, 1877, and died September 16th, 1935.
And that Barbados connection is so important. There was a lot of Jews that, or I would say Black Israelites that were called Black Portuguese and Black Spaniards that got kicked out in 1492 out of Spain and Portugal, and a lot of them ended up in Barbados. And if you know about Barbados, I think we talked this last year, is really closely connected to the Carolinas, because after the rice, sugar plantations start to be limited. A lot of them came to North Carolina and South Carolina for the rice plantations, and they took the same people and brought them here. So that's why we talked about how in South Carolina the woman had the history, and she talks about her Black Portuguese Jewish history, as well as her Gullah Geechee or Gullah connection as well. So if you know about the Gullah Geechees of North Carolina all the way down to Florida, you start mixing in these people, and you can understand more of our history and our direct connection to what's going on when we, talk about Barbados or Spain or Portugal, or the beginning of slavery. The first slaves to the English Americans, at least through the Dominican Republic, they were known to come from Spain and Portugal, not from Africa, and they were black. Black from, what's the place called? Grenada, in that area. So in Seville. So the slave trade started in Seville. That's exactly where they took the descendants of King David in 70 AD when the temple fell. They put them in Seville, and then they grew for thousands of years, and then the slave trade started there as well, and took people to the Dominican Republic and the West Indies and Barbados, and from there you can see how they can connect back to North Carolina, South Carolina, and other places also. All right.
He was born as Arnold. He was a Black nationalist and an immigrationist, just like Marcus Garvey, meaning he believed that Black people should connect with each other on a national level, and which meant removing this term black and accepting the term African or Ethiopian is what he chose, and to go back to Africa, which is what the emigration has pushed. He asserted that his father's ancestry could be traced back to the Levi'im, and this is how he grew up. And according to them, their family grew up with like kashrut, kept Shabbat. There was some level of ritual, taharat mishpacha, the family purity laws that they kept. But there was a mixture of Christianity in there at some point, and eventually it dropped away, and they just stuck to what they would, I guess, that they would consider at the time as the Old Testament. But he learned more and more under this man here in this picture by the name of Arthur Matthew Wentworth. And he was a founder of a community called the Commandment Keepers in New York. This was the late 1800s, early 1900s. There's a little bit of controversy up there in New York around the Commandment Keepers, because this is the way it was described to me. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, people like Matthew Wentworth were trying to reconnect to Judaism. A lot of these people had learned about the history of West African Jews. They connected strongly to the stories of the Exodus and to the prophets in the Tanakh. But then when they learned about the history of Jews in West Africa, it was this spiritual awakening that was happening in them. And so they felt maybe we could be descendants of these people. So they tried to gain as much information as they could from actual rabbis and in the Jewish community. But this is the early 1900s. Racism and prejudice is more out in the open and accepted at the time. And these are Black people walking in to these predominantly white spaces. And I don't think that they were just so welcome with open arms for probably for many reasons. But they did continue to try. But I think at some point they felt like, well, we have to keep doing what God told us to do. So they kept learning and growing and being observant. And by the time the 60s came, a group of rabbis went to their communities and said, hey, we'll do a mass conversion for your community. And at that point, they said, we've been doing this all along ourselves. Thanks, but no thanks. And they rejected it. And so there's controversy there of the halakhic status of these people in these communities. And
here you say halakha
it's complicated,
status.
But in any case, a lot of them have actually gone through the process of a halakha conversion. And some of their communities have actually joined under established Jewish organizations. And like I said, Rabbi Capers Funnye is actually a part of facilitating and governing these group of communities that are out there up north, up in New York. But in any case, this is the school of thought that Rabbi Josiah Ford comes from. And again, he learned under Matthew Wentworth. Josiah Ford, while he was growing up, his parents had him learn the harp, the violin, and bass. He studied music theory. And in 1899, he joined the musical corps of the British Royal Army, where he served on the HMS Alert. So he was in the military, served in the military, he learned music, and he came to America in 1910, where he met Willie the Lion Smith, and I'll talk about him in a second. Interesting character. The work that they did together, Josiah Ford and Marcus Garvey, is that they founded the New York chapter of the UNIA, which was the Universal Negro Improvement Association. I mentioned that before about Garvey, but Josiah Ford was a part of that. There was 3 others that were a part of it. There was Samuel Valentine, Nancy Paris, and Josiah Ford. They basically were a part of the core of the leadership, but these were 3 Hebrews. They considered themselves to be Hebrews. They studied religion together. They studied Hebrew, and they actually held synagogue services at the headquarters of the UNIA. So Marcus Garvey has his organization, and he's having a group of his leaders facilitating synagogue services. So this is an interesting early 1900s history that's happening here, which is not so well known. Garvey himself, the prominent stances that he took was unity of Africans and the African diaspora.
We'll stop it
So his
here.
connection to the land. And
We'll stop it here. So, you know, there's, you can go and watch the rest. He goes into more about the connection there of, you know, Marcus Garvey and some of the things there with Pan-Africanism, how they actually had the black Jews, right, running some of the religious culture of that. And a lot of people don't know even the making of the Pan-African flag that Marcus Garvey had was connected back to these people. So, like, this is part of our history, and we don't even know, right? But yet we see here, like, where were they during the civil rights? Where were they during these times? Even now, as people are waking up, you can see that this division that happened, right? That they kind of went, well, to me, they went the other way and start focusing on the Judaism piece of it and the conversion versus, you know, being establishing and connecting back to our people. So now you even see sometimes the some of their leaders were taught, you know, to me, kind of negatively about what some African Americans do that's not converting, or some of the other groups.
Question, as someone who did go through the conversion process, because who am I to decide who is and is not Jewish, right? That's what I always say whenever I talk to people. Who am I? So now you have all these people here in New York who are saying, well, we're the real Jews. My issues with the word real, because that means that all the other Jews who have been persecuted for centuries for being Jewish, suddenly that they're not Jews, right? But what would you say the conversion process did for you? Like, what's the difference between going through a conversion process or just waking up and being like, I am Jewish now?
Okay, so this is probably the best part of this whole conversation, because this is like such a huge concept. Okay, so the conversion process is a process where a person removes all the spiritual impurities from their body, from their soul, from everything in between the body and the soul inside of you, and it removes it from you. There's a process to it. I'm not going to go into super detail, but we know what happens, right? So that process of removing the negativity and the klipa is allowing that person now to keep this spiritual system that goes all the way back to Adam. I mean, it's manifest greater on Mount Sinai, expanded for a community and different things that we will be faced with as Jewish people. But this is the original spiritual system. So this isn't like a new thing. This is like the beginning of creation, being in line with creation all the way to now, right? So the conversion process is removing spiritual impurities. So it's not just like, oh, well, I need to have a circumcision and go in the water. You know, okay, if it was that, great. Whatever, do it yourself, right? No, the point is saying it's a process of removing that spiritual impurities and having witnesses there that are also spiritually pure, because it's a complete transformational experience. So when a person says, I'm Jewish, have you purified yourself? Because we know that you admitted yourself that your mom and dad were not keeping the Torah, right? That's why you have to do this whole explosion. And you're saying your grandmother wasn't doing it, and your great-grandmother wasn't, and the great one, and there was slavery, and there was intermixing with slave masters, and all these different things, right? That would break down the whole genetic theory. So if you went through that process and you're realizing it right now, you are full of negativity, and it has to be removed if you're going to keep the Torah. If not, that's why you're angry. That's why you're angry at everybody, because you want to keep the Torah and you're full of impurities. If you're saying, I'm saying this is going their logic. This is going their logic. They're saying, I'm Jewish. Okay, you're Jewish. All right, fine. You're Jewish. Now what? I'm keeping the laws of the Torah. Great, go and keep the laws of the Torah, right? Why are you angry? Because you're full of impurities. So unless you trust the system of the sages that go back for thousands of years, doing things all the way back, traditions from Avraham Avinu, and if you don't want to use that spiritual technology, all right, go ahead. You're going to be angry. You're going to want to hurt people. You're not going to be in a place of peace. You're going to be self-defeatist, and your people aren't going to get anywhere, period.
Some of the other groups versus trying to come and, you know, like even here, you can see there at more of a European Jewish synagogue, right? If you go just look at their pictures, you can tell. But they are interested in understanding and learning, right, about us. So I, you know, give them much credit. Even when I speak sometimes at different places, I've been invited to what they call it, Reformed Judaism synagogues, right? Because they're interested. But you know, I only been invited, I think, to one black church, right, to go and speak. And I don't go in there and just try to blast the church about their religion. I try to go and just talk about history. But you know, even in that sense, they're opening up. So that's the reason why I'm not against all Jewish people and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's actually majority of or half of the people that's living in Israel, the Israelis, they're atheists. They're not even believing in Judaism. So we got to be careful. You know, there's people even in our own community that's fighting harder against us. There's people on the outside of our community, and we got to understand, you know, what everybody is coming to do and their agendas, even in our own community. All right. So, but there are also, just to be honest, there's, you know, even in Israel, they try to say that you know, some of the news I've been watching try to say that African Americans are the most anti-Semitic people in, you know, one of the, I wouldn't say in the world, but one of the leading cause problems of anti-Semitism, where most of us don't even know what that even means or know anything about Israel or anything like that. So it's
We're joined now by Rabbi Mark Schneider, the president at the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding in New York. Thank you very much for joining us. We just saw this sort of juxtaposition of statements. Martin Luther King with his statement, previous generation, talking about the, at least, understanding that the black community had for Israel, supporting its right to exist, and this sort of modern generation of radical progressive activists that seems to be frothing at the mouth for
anything
blood.
like that. So
some of the
interesting what's going on, and people don't realize, you know, our people don't realize what's happening in the world right now. But next. All right. So this is just some stuff real quick. So you can see the same rabbi guy. You can see the Tuareg people there, and you can see where he talks about. Now, this is just Wikipedia. You can go straight to Wikipedia and learn about this, right? So this is not even something that's hidden. And you can see that they come from the oasis of the Algerian Sahara. So Algeria, right? So next slide. And you can see that this is a Christian website, the Joshua Project. I went over this before. You can see them called the I don't know how to say this, Adak Shahak. But you can see that means sons of Isaac, as in Abraham, Isaac, right? And Jacob. But you can see they're called the sons of Isaac. And where do they say they come from? You know, they come from Algeria. They live in Algeria, and they live in Niger. And they live among the Tuareg. So who are these people, right, that the Christian groups know about, but for some reason our people in our community don't know about them, right? So you can go up there and just find these people, right? So why aren't we knowing more about these people here in Mali, in the area of Mali? You can see there. I think they were ran out at one time as well, and they kind of live at the lower levels of the Tuareg people. All right, so next. So this is where, you know, this is that community that was up in New York. And you can see there on the right side, you can see this actually comes from a Duke University book. So if y'all know about Alan Garvey, you can go get his book, and he has pictures of black Jews here in America. And you see on the side, it talks about Turkish people. Some of these people are from Turkish Jews, Algerian Jews, Jews of India. Do you see any of those faces there that looks like any of those? They all look like black people. Maybe some at the very top is questionable, but the majority of them look like black people, are black people, right? So next, I'm just going to this real quick. So these are the Koshin Jews of India. They're known there to come from, they're the oldest Jews in India, and this is what they look like, right? Look at the darkness of their skin. Even in black and white, you can tell they're dark people. And they're saying that some of them later on came out of Spain, that's Iberia, in 1492. Isn't that when Columbus sailed the ocean blue? In 1492, you can see that date, right? So it shows you how they actually came to, you know, my cousin went there and got some pictures for them. It's very interesting. So next, and you can see they also call, this is the Duke University book again. You can see that they label these groups, and they, on the right side, and I have it highlighted, it says Black Jews or Koshin, right? So that was another name of them, were called Black Jews. So, you know, this is not just here in America that this was happening. This was around the world. All right, so next. And here, this is the South Carolina law back in the day, right? About slaves and free people. And I can't see it that far, so let me look at here locally. Pull up this slide so I can see what I'm reading. All right. And here it talks about the very section 1, right? The Act of 1740, section 1 declares all Negroes and Indians free Indians and then amity with the government, Negroes, mulattoes, mestizos, who are now free except to be a slave. The offspring to follow the condition of the mother. And that such slaves are chattels persons, right? So this is during, they're defining what a slave is in South Carolina, and they're actually later on, you'll see how they're trying to enslave some of the free blacks, and this is when they run out of South Carolina into North Carolina and other places. But if we go down to section 4, it says the term Negro is confined to slave Africans, the ancient Berbers. That's important. What's a Berber? A Berber is a North African, right? It's not even a West African. So that's Algeria and places like that. Morocco, Mauritania. So they considered us to be Berbers back then. So just like he was talking about in Algeria and, that's those people that went down to Mali, same thing. And that's the Dagutan. But these other people, it said these are free people. The Moors, the Egyptians, the Lascars are the people up there. They're supposed to be sailors from India and so forth. All right, just to give you a kind of heads up. So this is a Jewish virtual library. You can go there and you can type in the Zakor people, and there you can see the same thing. There they talk about the Mali Jews, and I have it highlighted there that they basically came from, some came from the Spanish Inquisition. Then in 1492, that date again, that's Columbus, the local king, Ashkai Muhammad, threatened the Jews with death if they did not convert to Islam. So they're running from Christianity, being forced to change to Islam. They're running from there, and they end up in Mali. So this is on the Jewish virtual, what is this? Library. You can just go there and type this in. This is not something that I just came up with. All right. So next, this is a guy. He had to flee after he started finding his history. He started looking back in the old books in Mali, and it was like in Arabic and stuff. And then he started seeing stuff that was talking about their Israelite heritage. And then after he started speaking up and starting a group, there was threats, and he had to run to Spain, I think. So, but he wrote this book. Of course, it's in another language. That's why I said if we had volunteers that could speak Spanish. I think this is in Spanish, but also got a lot of books in French, as the guy was talking about. I don't speak Spanish or French. So we need people who can volunteer to read Spanish and French to tell us what these books say, right? All right, next. And this is the, I should have this up here because this is actually the Kalanu. This is the Jewish outreach to different people around the world. They try to get you to convert, but they reach out in Africa. But they even got Jews of Timbuktu. They talk about people in this Mali area that were the Jews. All right, next. And you can see here, even on this old 1700 map, 1766, they got a place in Africa, middle of north of West Africa, that's called Lam Lam. According to Esrices, the land hereabout was populated by Jews. So this is 1766, right? Way before Black Hebrew Israelites are in New York and all the stuff they try to say Black Hebrew Israelites started from. All right, next. All right, so this is Tenderma. This is what we're talking about in Mali. You can see there in the Timbuktu, he talks a little bit about this. You can see once again on Wikipedia, it talks about how they came from Iberia, the Sephardic, that means Spain, right? They came from the Spain Jews, Sephardic Jews who had been expelled from Spain and Portugal. But you can see what year was it established? 1496, right after 1492. So these are Spanish Jews or Black Portuguese as well that came down. They went to North Africa, got pushed down to Mali. You can see this. This is real easy to see. So next, you can see my DNA. This is my DNA. Where it comes, Mali and Sierra Leone. These are the same Mandi people and people of that nature. So Songhai, when he was talking about the Songhai kingdom, same thing. All right, next. And you can see the Mandinka. So that's my DNA as well. One of the groups is called the Mandinka, and they also are connected to those same people that started the Mali Empire. The one that he talked about that was a Black Jew that's from Yemen that started that. There you go, right? So this is easy to connect once we understand what tribe. So that's the reason why the genealogy workshops that we do for people is so important, because you can't track it from family, father, but you can track your DNA, right? You can see where it is and those people that's connected to your DNA now, and you can find out what tribe they come from, and then you can easily do this history, right? So next. All right, so that's it. I just want to kind of cover some of that stuff just to kind of bring it all back together so people kind of understand why we do what we do and why it's so important. But we want to also make sure we understand through the word why it's important. Because one thing to know, once again, the head knowledge, but when it's going to come to our heart to understand and for us to make action on it, right? It's one thing to know all this knowledge and feel like oh, yes, I know who we are. But what does that mean from a spiritual sense? What is Yah trying to do for us, right? So we were talking about covenants before Hanukkah. So let's get back to what we were talking about around covenants. So that's the reason why next we go through all these different things while we're going through this, so we can get a better understanding, so we can get documented. You can go back to the old videos, and you can learn some about some of these things and some of the things that we'll be breaking up and talking about in the future as well. All right. So next, so we're still talking about the renewed covenants, and I know I have like around 30 minutes. So if we go to the next one, and we talked about last time about, Deuteronomy, 30, because we went from Deuteronomy 27, Deuteronomy 28, Deuteronomy 29, Deuteronomy 30, Deuteronomy 31 talks about the Song of Moses, and, was a song of a witness against the people. So we can see that even though our ancestors, even after they received the covenant on Mount Horeb, they received the second covenant in the desert, during the Moab desert, where they received the second covenant. And now we know that even after they received the tablets, they did the golden calves, right? They broke the covenant. As soon as they got it, they were breaking the covenant left and right, right? But does that mean, even though we broke the covenant, does that mean that Yah broke his side of the covenant? That's very important, right? So during the whole Bible, we'll see that there was all this renewal, either from Yah trying to keep his side to get the people to get back on track, or from the people trying to say, oh, we messed up, we need to renew this covenant with him, right? So that's very important, because people are like, oh, the covenant's gone, now there's a new Israel, which are just Christians, right? But that's not true. Yah always had this covenant with the people of Israel, and he was always trying to wake them up, trying to bring them back. And they even counted for their sins, and they were trying to get back on track, just like we are today. That's what the same process is. And that was the Deuteronomy 28 curses that, these bad things are going to follow us until we wake up to who we are. So this is that cycle that we're going through. So let's just read through Ezekiel 16. There's a couple of verses, but it's important for us to read through this as well. So starting at Ezekiel 16, verse 1, then the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, Son of man, make known to Jerusalem her abomination. So Yah is trying to say, wake up, people. You're living living in sin. You're making me mad. You're living the ways that I don't, wasn't part of the agreement, the covenant that I had with you, right? And say, thus says Yahuwah Elohim to Jerusalem, your origin and your birth are from the land of the Canaanite, right? So we know that the people moved, so you should have some Canaanite DNA, right? Because the Canaanites, especially Judah, who became what people call today the Jews, at least from a historical standpoint, not the modern day interpretation of the Jew is different than the historical. The historical one is that they actually come from Judah, not a conversion to Judaism, which is the modern day term. But the ancient term is that you come from the people of Judah, right? So he says, and Judah basically married, a Canaanite woman, and then he had his child by Tamar, who was a local Canaanite that was supposed to marry, his son that died and his next son that died, and he held back his third son, and she tricked him and had a child by Judah. So two Canaanite women had the beginning of the tribe of Judah, right? So you should have this Canaanite DNA, which people say are black, right? These black people, they try to say that the cursed people, and that's what they try to say, the curse of Ham and stuff like that, and a lot of justified slavery. So you got to understand those terms, which we might have a video about that in the near future. But it says that he's saying, Yah says, your origin and your birth are from the land of the Canaanite. Your father was an Amorite, and your mother a Hittite. So he's talking kind of derogatory to him, like, hey, don't forget where you came from. You was nothing before, but he's basically saying, I established you, right? So in verse 4, it says, as for your birth, on the day you were born, your navel coat was not cut, nor were you washed with water for cleansing. You are not rubbed with salt or even wrapped in cloth. No eye looked with pity on you to do any of these things for you, to have compassion on you. Rather, you were thrown out into the open field, and for you were abhorred on the day you were born. So basically saying that nobody wanted to be connected to us, right? It was nothing. As a people, he's talking to Jerusalem, but he's talking figurative, right? Personification. He's giving Jerusalem a name and basically comparing to his people, us, right? So he's saying nobody wanted you. You were worthless. You were nothing. So we can't be prideful and say, oh, we Israelites because we know who we are. No, we need to know who he is, and that's who gives us our power. So it's not beside ourselves. We were nobody special before Yah took us to be his people, right? We were one of the smallest people, he even said. We were hardly nothing. So it's the fact that he called us to be his people, and we came into that covenant agreement with him. So it says in verse 6, when I passed by you and saw you squirming in your blood, and said to you while you were in your blood, live. Yes, I said to you while you were in your blood, live. I made you numerous like plants of the field. Then you grew up, became tall, and reached the age for fine ornaments. Your breasts were formed, and your hair had grown. You were naked and bare. So he's basically saying now, hey, you done grew up to be these people, right? And you kind of, once again, personifying as a woman. So you hear that a lot in the Bible, like in Hosea, when he talks about, told Hosea go marry a prostitute. And he basically took that as a way to talk about how his love is for Israel and how we left him like a harlot, and how Yah still loves us and how he still wants to come and bring us back to be his people. Like Hosea had to go and get the wife and bring her back after she was used up and all old and raggedy, that he had to still bring her back, right? So he said that's his love for us as a people. So once again, he's keeping his side of the agreement, even though we broke our side. And that's what he's doing now, talking to us like that woman, that child that grows up, the girl that hardly just plays around tomboy. She grows up and she, becomes a woman, and now she starts kind of, you can say, start feeling herself, right? So in verse 8 it says, then I passed by you and saw you, and behold, you were at that time for love. So I spread my skirt over you and covered your nakedness. I also swore to you and entered into a covenant with you, so that you became mine, declares Yahuwah. So it's like a marriage, right? He's marrying Israel. He came into a covenant with him. Then I bathed you with water, washed off your blood from you, and anointed you with oil. I also clothed you with embroidered clothes, and put sandals of porpoise skin on your feet. And I wrapped you with fine linen and covered you with silk. All right, next one. I adorned you with ornaments, put bracelets on your hand and necklace around your neck. I also put a ring in your nostril. That's very interesting, right? Because we know even in the story with Isaac, when he sent his Abraham sent his servant to go find Isaac a wife among his people and the Syrians. That when he found Rebecca, Rebecca put a nose ring in to show that she was married, right? So it's interesting to see that here too. But I also put a ring in your nostril, earrings in your ears, and beautiful crown on your head. Thus you were adorned with gold and silver, and your dress was full of linen, of fine linen, silk and embroidered cloth. You ate fine flour, honey, and oil. So you were exceedingly beautiful and advanced to royalty, right? So he basically took care of her. Then your fame went forth among the nations on account of your beauty, for it was perfect because of my splendor, which I bestowed on you, declares Yahuwah. So he basically said, oh, yes, now you're famous. So you can see that all in the Bible when the Israelites, everybody, even when they went to the land of Canaan, what's her name? Rahab said, oh, we know about you. I don't want to get beat down with the people and killed. I want to cleave to you, right? So you can see how that was because of Yah, though. It wasn't because of who they were. It was because of who Yah was that gave them victory at the battles and made them to people like Deuteronomy 28. The first part of Deuteronomy 8, the blessings, right? He was giving them the blessings before they start receiving the curses because of their sin. So verse 15, it says, but you trusted in your beauty and played a harlot because of your fame. And you poured out your harlotries on every passer-by who might be willing. You took some of your clothes, made for yourself high places of various colors, and played a harlot on them, which should never come about nor happen. You also took your beautiful jewels made of my gold and of my silver. He's saying, this is stuff I gave you, which I have given you, and made for yourself male images that you might play the harlot with them. Made these gods and stuff, right? You basically use what I gave you, and now you're worshiping something a different way that I told you. Then you took your embroidered clothes and covered them, and offered my oil and my incense before them. Also my bread, which I gave you, fine flour, oil, and honey, which I fed you, you would offer before them for a soothing aroma. So it happened, declares Yahuwah. So he's just saying, how your love for me left. You're going to these other gods, right? And that's what happened a lot with Israel, right? They start worshiping other gods. And it's like after he's done so much for you, just like we talked about with the golden calf, he just brought them out of Egypt, just opened up the waters, just helped them, just killed out their enemy, the Egyptians that was more powerful. And now they're worshiping a golden calf, right? Just because they're lost patience for Moses to come back down from the mountain to give them the commandments. So verse 20, moreover, you took your sons and daughters whom you have borne to me and sacrificed them to idols to be devoured. Were your harlotries so small a matter? You slaughtered your children and offered them up to idols by causing them to pass through the fire, right? So we know that crossing over, right? And I've seen people talk about the crossing over. You pass, not saying that you go in the fire, but you go on the other side of the fire, right? And even in some of the current day customs of Roman Catholicism, in some places they jump over the fire for like St. John or St. Joseph's Day. It's like some strange thing. They're jumping over this fire, and it's like, what's going on? You cross over this fire. What does this mean? So we can see how, things that's not connected to the Bible that we're now engaged in, right? That's the reason why Roman Catholicism got connected. They took their pagan Roman gods and they connected it to the Bible. So that's the reason why a lot of people just did January, right? The god Janus, right? The god Janus was the god of the past and the future. So Julius Caesar, he changed the date of New Year's from being in the spring to January. So that's the reason. Just look up the month of January, right? If you want to know about these gods, look up the month of February. What does February mean? Why does it name that, right? So these things are very simple things to do. Why do we celebrate, Yahushua's birthday? Well, I'm going to say Jesus' birthday on December 25th. Every minister would tell you his birthday is not on that day. So why do we celebrate that day, right? So they try to come up with something from from older times. They say, oh, no, see what happened is that, they counted this formula backwards and was like March or something, but they call March Ladies' Day or the Ladies' something day, right? But before even the times of Roman Catholicism in the Bible, they were already celebrating that day. And if you count from that March day, March 25th, 9 months, how long does it take a woman to give birth? 9 months. You have the birth of the sun god, December 25th. So this is just simple stuff that's easily can be found, but people just don't want the same thing that Israel was doing then. They're like, oh, we want to be like the other nations. We want to worship their gods. We want to get part of their customs. So that's the whole thing of Hanukkah, was that dedication to him, to break free from those Hellenization of the Greek culture getting given to our people, right? And it cost people their lives. They fought with their lives not to give in to. Now we're just assimilated, right? We're just like the Greek Jews that was talked about, even through in the books of Acts, that tried to kill Paul because he was preaching the gospel, right? They so assimilated until the current culture, they forgot who they were. And now they hold on more to their current culture than trying to seek out the culture that Yah has given them to his covenant. Same thing that's happening in this is the same thing we're doing now. Same place that we are right now. Connected to Greek culture, right? Greek frats, Greek sororities. Like, why are we so connected to the Greeks? People are like, oh no, those are the original Egyptian gods that got passed through the Greek people. That's exactly what he's saying here. Right? We'll see even more so as we go on. All right, so next slide. So verse 22 says, besides all your abominations and harlotries, you did not remember the days of your youth. So we forgot who we are as a people. The days of our youth, right? Our ancestors, our heritage. We forgot that. When you were naked and bare and squirming in your blood, then it came about after all your wickedness. Woe to you, declares Yahuwah. that you built yourself a shrine and make yourself a high place in every square. You built yourself a high place at the top of every street and made your beauty abominable. And you spread your legs to every passerby to multiply your harlotry. You also played the harlot with the Egyptians. You see? The Egyptians, your lustful neighbors, and multiplied your harlotry to make me angry. Behold, now I have stretched out my hand against you and diminished your rations. I have delivered you up to the desires of those who hate you, the daughters of the Philistines, who are ashamed of your lewd conduct. Even the Philistines were ashamed of them and what they were doing. And we should saw the Tarags, right? That they were the Philistines, and our people are living under them even to this day. Moreover, you played a harlot with the Assyrians because you were not satisfied. You played a harlot with them and still were not satisfied. You also multiplied your harlot with the land of the merchants, Chaldea, Babylon, right? Iraq. Yet even with those you were not satisfied. How language is your heart, declares Yahuwah, while you do all these things, the actions of a bold-faced harlot. Your bold-faced harlot. That's something there, right? So it's because of the heart. They desire to do these things. And that's what we desire. It doesn't, hey, that's not what it means to me. I don't care. I'm going to do these things and celebrate the way I want to, right? It's like, wait a minute, but what did Yah say? What did he want, right? It's no longer that. It's based on how I feel, what other people tell me. Even though I can read in the Bible it's wrong, I'm still going to go and celebrate and do things that's not right, right? When Yah's trying to call us out to be separate. That's what holy means, Kadesh, to be set apart, right? To be that same people that he had adorned and he had moved up from a birth onto this beautiful woman. You know, that's what he wants us to be, this beautiful woman, so he can marry us, right? That's the end, when Yahushua comes and marries the bride, right? So we're supposed to be without spot and wrinkle. So that's what he's trying to make us, but we continue to go after these strange gods, these strange customs, to do the things that we want to do instead of the things that he so desired for us to do. Verse 31, when you built your shrine at the beginning of every street and made your high place in every square, and disdaining money, you are not like a harlot. You adulterous wife who takes strangers instead of her husband. Adultery, right? Next. Men give gifts to all hearts, but you give your gifts to all your lovers to bribe them to come to you from every direction of your harlotries. Thus you are different from the women in your harlotries, in that no one plays the harlot as you do, because you give money and no money is given you. Thus you are different. So even like a prostitute takes the money, right? He's saying you are giving them money to be a harlot. Like, wow, I don't even know what you call that, right? Reverse prostitution or something. Like, I'm gonna pay you to defile me, right? Like, wow. So he's basically saying that, right? You're choosing this, you wanting to, right? You're basically supporting it, and that's what we do too. We're supporting these things that know that's not good for our community. The music, we know it's not good for our community. You know, got stuff talking about women, and you know, I'm hearing older people now talking about they want to go to a Wu-Tang concert, and I'm like, wow, back in the day it used to be kids. Now I guess, you know, now the adults are doing it. You know, some of the stuff that's being taught, Beyonce and people like that are talking about how they worshiping devils, and we're like supporting it, right? Like, oh, we want to go see. Even I hear Israelites want to go and support it, right? So it's like we got to come out of that, right? Yah has blessed us as a great people. And it's not that we're trying to hate those people, right? We want them to be saved. That's what my prayer was, right? We want all our people to be saved. So what are we doing to do that, though? It's one thing to pay for, you know, some of these things that Yah hates, these abominable acts that we support in our communities. But that's why I was saying, how much do we support the things that Yah is trying to do to our people? How much are we trying to come together to have these conversations, right? Or are we just going to continue to live in this system that we know is not helping us, that we continue to fail here in America, and we won't rise up even though we have the strongest, you know, Elohim, God in the world? We still choose the sin. We still choose trying to be like the world, right? And he says, if you love the world, then, you know, you can't love me too. You either love the world, it's me, or the world. Which one is it? And we continue to choose the world. And that's what our custom is way back from the very beginning, right? So Therefore, O harlot, hear the word of Yahuwah. Thus says Yahuwah Elohim, because your lewdness was poured out and your nakedness uncovered through your harlotries with your lovers and with all your detestable idols, and because of the blood of your sons which you gave the idols, therefore, behold, I will gather all your lovers with whom you took pleasure, even all those whom you loved, and all those whom you hated. So I will gather them against you from every direction and expose your nakedness to them, that they may see all your nakedness. So we know that the temple was destroyed multiple times, right? So he's saying, hey, this is the reason all these people now are coming against you now, right? They came to a confederacy. Well, a lot of people know, I think that's Psalms 83, if I'm not mistaken, when it talks about a confederacy will become against you, right? All these different nations, and all those nations are not, as people try to make it, European nations. They are Middle Eastern, as we will call it today at least, Middle Eastern nations, the Moabs, right? The Moabites, the Amorites. Those are the children of Lot. Lot was Abraham's nephew. Those are the enemies of the Israelites. The same people, right? Same Hebrew people were coming against the Israelites, right? So we can see, it talks about even the Put, right? Put, or the what's the other people? Can't think of them right now. That's Libya, right? Africans coming against their own people, as we will call it today, your own people. So 38, thus I will judge you like women who commit adultery or shed blood are judged, and I will bring on the blood of wrath and jealousy. I will also give you into the hands of your lovers, and they will tear down your shrines, demolish your high places, strip you of your clothing, take away your jewels, and leave you naked and bare. Isn't that interesting? Even though this is happening during the time of the ancient times, but what happened to us in Africa, right? As he said, didn't they take our clothing? A lot of people think we just came over here like naked and bare because we were running around the jungle naked. No, we had full clothing, nice clothing, and everything else. They stripped us of our clothing and they put us on the ships to make us look like savages, so people would buy us and kind of have that cognizant dissonance. So that way, when they treat us terrible, they wouldn't feel bad about it, right? So they, even when we're in our little villages, those people that came in, the slave raiders tore down the villages, right? So, even then you start hearing about the Ashanti people, right? What happened in Ghana, right? They were looking for their magic stool so they can get their stool and break them down from being, so like they were trying to find the things that they admired, those things that they held up in order to break them down as a people. So that's what Yah was doing to the people then. So didn't Deuteronomy 28 said it was going to be continuous, it's going to happen over and over and over again? So we can see, hey, that's exactly what's going on. Even to today, said until you're wiped off the earth, it was going to continue to happen, right? So next, they will incite a crowd against you, and they will stone you and cut you to pieces with their swords. They will burn your houses with fire and execute judgment on you in the sight of many women. Then I will stop you from playing the harlot, and you will also no longer pay your lover. So I just feel like the Song of Moses says that we're going to be to a point where we're going to reach out to him. He's going to say, where are your gods at now? The gods that you basically wanted to reach out during that time. You're right. Why didn't you reach out to me? Right from the beginning. So, I just feel like he's that cycle that's getting ready to happen if we don't repent. So 42, so I will calm my fury against you, and my jealousy will depart from you, and I will be pacified and angry no more. So he's not going to just let us continue to do like we want to do, because we're people of the covenant, whether we like it or not. Our ancestors basically came into that covenant, and it says, hey, he said he has received it, and he's going to hold us down by it. So all those curses are going to continue to happen until we wake up and do the things that he's called us to do. Because 43, because you have not remembered the days of your youth. You have not remembered your heritage, basically, but have enraged me by all these things. Behold, I in turn will bring your conduct down on your own head, declares Yahuwah, so that you will not commit these lewdness on top of all your other abominations. Behold, everyone who quotes Proverbs will quote this proverb concerning you, saying, like mother, like daughter. So what does he mean by that? You are the daughter of your mother who loathed your husband and children. You are also the sister of your sisters who loathed their husbands and children. Your mother was a Hittite. So he's going back and calling us that Canaanite again. From the very beginning, he said, you're Canaanite, right? You Jerusalem, you came from the Canaanites, right? That's what he's talking about. You're like the Canaanites. These people that were defiling and offering up these sacrifices and these strange, the sun god Baal and worshiping, and your father an Amorite. So he's basically, once again using that as a derogatory word towards us because we have rejected him. We want to be more like the people of the land than the people that has been called to the covenant, right? So he's word playing there. All right, next 49. For thus says Yahuwah, I will also do with you as you have done. You have despised the oath by what? Breaking the covenant. So he acknowledged that we've been breaking the covenant. And then verse 60, nevertheless, I will remember my covenant with you in the day. So he said, I'm going to keep my side of the bargain. Even though you broke your side over and over and over and over again, I'm going to hold to my side of the promise. And I will establish an everlasting covenant with you. So he said he's going to, he's going to remember the covenant that we broke, but he's going to make sure there's an everlasting covenant with who? With the Israelites, right? Not just the new church or something like that. He's still talking about the Israelites, just like Paul was talking about. I'm still an Israelite, he was saying, right? That he said, you are the grafted in, but God's going to remember the natural branch, right? In Romans 11. So then you will remember your ways and be ashamed when you receive your sisters, both your older and your younger, and I will give them to you as daughters, but not because of your covenant. Thus I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall know that I am Yahuwah, so that you may remember and be ashamed and never open your mouth anymore because of your humiliation. When I have forgiven you for all that you have done, Yahuwah has declared. So he's saying that this sounds like a last day covenant, right? So we know that the people, even after this in the Bible, they continue to sin. So we know that this has not been established yet. So this covenant that he wants to establish with us forever, right? So we know that Yahushua came and that brought in the new covenant as well. And he basically reestablished that his covenant. He gave us his covenant. And he said that, that's one that's going to happen. And, we're going to the next slide, actually. So, let me see. I'm sorry, not yet. But so in the same way, in Ezekiel, we can see that in Joshua, something similar happened. So like I said, they just got out of the land of Egypt. They went through the desert, messed up so many times. Moses hit the rock mad because hard-headed people didn't do right, but he didn't look at his connection back to Yah, so he lost out on going into the promised land. He told them what to do right when they get there, and Joshua is leading them out. So we talked about how Joshua got there. He circumcised the people. Now at the end of the book of Joshua, let's see what happens, right? So it says, then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem. Hopefully you remember where Shechem was from what we talked about even with Deuteronomy 28. And called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and their judges and their officers. And they presented themselves before Yah. Now therefore fear Yahuwah. Now he's saying this. Now therefore fear Yahuwah and serve him in sincerity and truth. Right? Are we serving Yah in sincerity and truth now? We're kind of like when he talks about I don't want you hot or cold, lukewarm. That's that lukewarmness, right? He doesn't want that lukewarmness. He wants you hot, right? Sincerity and truth. So how can you live in truth when you're not even researching? That's what happened to me as a Christian minister. I start seeking for truth. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Something's not right here, right? And my devotion to Yah, my sincerity, my love for him outweighed my connection to an organization, right? Because the truth, he said, only few will find, right? And he said we need to make every effort to push our way self in. He said that even the righteous will scarcely make it in. And we act like everybody's going to go, oh, I can do what I want to do, just cry on Sunday and ask for forgiveness, and I'm good to go sin the next week, right? Y'all don't play around, right? So it says, and put away the gods which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt and serve Yahuwah. So he said, put away those old gods that we continue to allow to come up. Even to this day, even though we might not recognize it, it's those same Egyptian gods that we're serving, rather through the Greek or frats and sororities. It's the same Egyptian gods. And it's easy to see that if you know about history and how the gods and stuff work, right? So, we are in the same thing, and we try to connect, because my mom and my daddy did these traditions, I want to do it, right? It doesn't matter what your mom and daddy do. What does the Bible say do? They had their time because they only knew but so much. Rather, it's your grandma, your great-grandma, right? Y'all going to hold them accountable for what they know. But now that we got internet, you just Google. Google, how did the church change from Saturday to Sunday? Well, not Saturday, the Shabbat from Friday, the seventh day to the first day. Just Google it, and it will tell you. AI and everything else will tell you all about it. And we're too lazy to do that or even believe going to the library, encyclopedias, and all this stuff that we got in our hand. Y'all going to hold us accountable for what we know, because we're passing that on to our next generation as well. So just like our fathers and mothers and grandparents and every ancestors are accountable to what they knew at the time, we're going to be accountable in this information age, what we need to give to our children and our next generation as well, right? But 15, if it is disagreeable in your sight to serve Yahuwah, choose for yourself today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which are beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites, whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yahuwah. So he's even telling this to the people of Israel just after they got to the promised land. They're already serving strange gods. In verse 16, the people answered, said, far be it from us that we shall forsake Yahuwah to serve other gods. And they still did it even after this was done. For Yahuwah, our Elohim, he is he who's brought us and our fathers out of the land of Egypt, acknowledging the heritage from the house of bondage. So Egypt is connected to the house of bondage. And even when you see in Deuteronomy 28, it talks about that he will bring us out of Egypt on ships, right? Bondage, once again, on ships. And who did these great signs in our sights and preserved us through all the way in which we went, and among all the peoples through whose midst we passed? Yahuwah drove out from before us all the peoples, even the Amorites who lived in the land, who also will serve Yahuwah, we also will serve Yahuwah, for he is great. So they acknowledge that it was his power. So we say that all the time during Black History Month, that God brought us out, right? He was with us through the slave and transatlantic slave trade, and he brought us out. We came out singing Negro spiritual songs, Kumbaya, and all kind of stuff. Crossing over Jordan, and all those songs. What's the one? Way by the water. They got that part in it. Who are the Israelites dressed in red? It must be the ones that Moses led. Who's those dressed in white? It must be the Israelites. We were singing all these songs, and once again, we forgot who he is, right? We said, we're dedicated. We acknowledge what you did, but now we're going to go and do the things that we want to do and follow the land, the people of the land, right? So in verse 19, then Joshua said to the people, you will not be able to serve Yahuwah, for he is holy. He is a holy Elohim. He's we're supposed to be a set apart God, a set apart nation. We're not supposed to be like all the other people. We're supposed to be the sign. We're supposed to be the people that supposed to witness to those people, not assimilating to the things that they want us to do. He is a jealous God, right? He will not forgive your transgression or your sins. If you forsake Yahuwah and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after he has done good to you. That's what he did. Transatlantic slave trade right there, right? He turned on us because we turned on him. He's not going to just sit there and be like, it's okay, like some bad parents do when they see their child spit on the grandma and do flips in the house and tear up the furniture. It's okay. No, he's not like that. He's going to be like, okay, you need to sit on down. You act like you know where you come from. And that's how he's doing us, right? Like, okay, you want to act up? All right, I'm going to show you, right? We know how our people do. And they, even more so, our Elohim, our Yah, our God. So the people said to Joshua, what did they say? No, but we will serve Yahuwah. They still say they're going to do it. And we know that they didn't do what they said they were going to do. So Joshua said to the people, you are witness against yourselves. So just like the song of Moses, the song of Moses was a witness. It's a song of a witness against ourselves. So once again, right after we got out of the promise, I got out of the desert. We got to the promised land, and here we are being a witness against ourselves. That you have chosen for yourself Yahuwah to serve him, and they said, we are witnesses. Now therefore put away the foreign gods which are in the midst, and incline your hearts to Yahuwah, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, we will serve Yahuwah our God, and we will obey his voice. So Joshua did what? Made a covenant with the people that day. So we can see they already had a covenant. So why do they have to make a new covenant? Because they messed up that covenant. That covenant has been renewed, right? So we continue to see this renewal of the covenant over and over and over every time the people sin, because Yah said, I got my side. You're the one keep on messing up. You're the one keep on breaking it with the people that day, and made for them a statue in the ordinance in where? In Shechem. Important, Shechem. Where do we know Shechem? Let's keep going though. So when we talk about even during the time of the combination of gods, right? So as we talked about in Hanukkah, when they have Ptolemy, the king of the north, the king of the south that Daniel talks about, the king of the south was Ptolemy or Ptolemy, and it talks about this Seraphus Christos that the Ptolemy people actually came up with. And they basically, after Alexander the Great died, they took the Egyptian gods, right, and they mixed it into Greek culture. So we can see the same Egyptian gods getting caught up in the Greek culture. And what did the Romans do? They took the Greek gods and brought them to the Roman culture. So then what did they do? They took the Bible and they mixed it into their culture with their gods. Same God, same Egyptian God, passed from generation, from people to people to people to people. And we can see that it says, after it says, combine the elements of the Egyptian and Greek culture, he started with Osiris, the Egyptian god of the underworld, and added the worship of Apis, the sacred Egyptian bull. Ptolemy then Hellenized the appearance of his new Osiris Apis god. The Greeks wanted the god to look like people without animal heads. So he made them look like what the white people in Europe or the Europeans during that time looked like, was like this, right? Like Zeus and stuff. The results was Seraphus, a god with long hair and a full beard, who was the god of the afterlife, healing, or hell, afterlife, healing and fertility. The cult of the composite god Seraphus was never that popular in Egypt itself, but it later spread to the other parts of the Roman Empire, where Seraphus was also known as the patron god of the sailors, the what? The sun god, Baal. That's what all through the Bible is, Baal, the sun god. And even replacement for Zeus, the chief god. So they even put him higher than Zeus. And where did they start worshiping Seraphus? In Syria, in Damascus, right? In Antioch. So when the believers in the Bible, it says, where did they first call them Christians? In Antioch, where they was worshiping Seraphus Christos, right? So this was, if you want to say the anointed one in Hebrew is Messiah, right? You should say Messiah, not Christ. But they basically took the same thing and made it a mockery by calling them Christos. The followers, they associated the followers of Messiah with those who follow Christos. And you can see that this is coming. I read this straight. You see the quotes? I read this from a Christian website, gotquestions.org. So you should type this, is the account of Jesus taken from the story of Seraphus Christus. You can go to Got Questions and they'll tell you about this story, but they'll say that it's separate from the Messiah of the Bible, which we say as well. We believe that Yahushua was a black, man that actually was a Hebrew, not a Greek man that walked around with long straight hair and full beard, as this talks about here, right? That looks more like a European. All right, next. So that's the reason why it says in Jeremiah 31, right? It says, behold, the days are coming. Talking about the future, declares Yahuwah, when I will make what? A new covenant. With who? The house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not like the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them. So this is Jeremiah. This is not Ezekiel, what we just read. He's still considering himself a husband, and he's still talking about how he's going to hold on to his side of the covenant, right? Declares Yahuwah. But this covenant, which I make with who? The house of Israel, the Bet. House means Bet, the Bet of Israel, because Bethel, right? Bethel was the house of Yah, right? That's the place where they made the covenant. After those days, declares Yahuwah, I'll put my law in them and on their heart, and I will write it, and I will be the Elohim, and they shall be my people. It's talking about future covenant that was going to happen. So that's still in our future that this is going to happen. Now, Yahushua came and he brought in a new covenant, but we know that even that we received the covenant, we're still not living like the people, like he's supposed to, right? So those who wants to come on to this covenant can do so, but in the end, there's still going to be people that's going to be burned. And Revelation talks about all liars, all abominable people will be thrown in the lake of fire. So we know that everything in this covenant has not been done. It's been established, but it has not been all fully into effect until Yahushua comes back, right, and declares his house and his people, and to bring us back to who we're supposed to be, and clear out those who are the rebellious ones, right? And in verse 34, they will not teach again, each man his neighbor and each man his brother, saying, know Yahuwah, for they will all know me. So we don't all know him yet. From the least of them to the greatest of them, declares Yahuwah, for I will forgive their iniquity and their sin, I will remember no more. So we know that he's still going to remember sin, because people are going to go to hell here in the future. But he has established his covenant through Yahushua, right? And anybody wants to hold on to that covenant can do so, but he said only a few were fine, right? He said he's not praying for everybody, Yahushua said in that Garden of Gethsemane. He said, I'm praying for the ones that you have given me, right? So everybody's not part of that covenant, even though you might have a religion or religious acts, but until you hold on to him and change your life and repent, you're not part of that covenant, even if you say you're Israel, right? Because it's given to Israel, the house of Israel, but even Israel has a heart change, right? So we won't break the covenant that our forefathers have broken as well. All right. So next, all right. So even just to show, this is where we talked about this, right? So Jacob was in the city of Shechem. He bought a land, right? So that's when his daughter Dinah was raped, right? But he bought a land in the land of Shechem. They went around and they did stuff, right? So next. And we talked about this already. So, it says that then they went back to this land. And it says, then Yahuwah said to Jacob, arise and go to Bethel, the house of Yah, and live there, and make an altar to Yah, who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and all those with him, put away your foreign gods, which are among you, and purify yourself, and change your garments. Remember we talked about this? And let us arise and go to Bethel. So they live in Shechem, right? And they're going to Bethel. They're purifying themselves. So it's just like in the Joshua, right, when they made a covenant, where were they? They were in Shechem, right? So it's interesting that this connection to Shechem was all this about putting down your gods and renewing yourself. Because they even took the gods there in verse 4. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods in which they had, and the rings which were in their ears. That's interesting. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was near Shechem. All right. So we talked about that already, but next, so also Shechem was where Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal was, the place when they first entered in, right? And they had the blessings on one mountain and the curses on the other. Deuteronomy 27, Deuteronomy 28. We're back at that same place now. Well, after Joshua came in here in verse 8, and they basically said the blessings and curses, what happened? They went towards the curses. And now Joshua is going to die. He had to make another covenant. That's what we just read earlier. He had to reestablish the covenant again in the same place that they were given the blessings and the curses. And even if you know what happened after Joshua, and you start talking about the judges and Gideon and some of those people, you get to Abimelech, who declared himself a king, right, and has killed all his brothers. And one brother, I think it's Jotham, he went to the top of Mount Gerizim and he pronounced a curse on the people for what had happened. So people don't really understand how important Shechem and these mountains were, but we can, as we saw earlier, they're still established, still got a altar on top of it, even until this day, as a witness to what happened. But yet we won't believe. All right, next. So we know that Jezebel, right, was married to King Ahab, and she worshipped Baal because she was from the king of Sidon. Sidon is Lebanon today, and then those are the places that she came from, and she was a black woman. Right? And she married into the Hebrews, the Judah, king of Judah. Right? Let me make sure I'm right by that. No, king of the northern tribe. She married into, right? So Ahab was a northern tribe. And then they had a child together. So next slide. And that was Attila, right? Attila, she was half Hebrew, half Scythian, right? So that shows you she was a black woman. And she basically married the king of Judah, right? And then when he died, she killed all the children, grandchildren that he had, and only had one that kind of got taken away. And she basically set up a temple of Baal. She took the temple, the Israelite temple, and put Baal stuff in it, right? Wickedness. Once again, that same cycle that we continue to go through. Put the balls, right? The sun god. That's what a ball is, the sun god, up in the Israelite temple and defiled it, right? And then she was the first queen. She actually took over the throne for a while, wicked queen, and later was the throne as well. But she took over both houses. She ruled both. Well, she was from the tribe of the northern tribe. She wasn't ruling it, but she was from the northern tribe, but she was ruling over the southern tribe at that time. So there's a battle between the northern and southern tribe, even happening to today, and people don't realize it because he says he's going to bring those two sticks together. So next. And then, so we know that in the Vatican, there's this God, Sol Invictus, Christ Sol, Christ as the Son. It's in the Vatican. It's in the church, Roman Catholic Church. And they put it up as the Sun God. And this is a picture. You can just go to the Vatican and see it. And it's supposed to be as Christ. They're mixing the Bible with the Sun God. Once again, mixing that stuff. And we go to the next one, and we know that Constantine, we can see his coin has Sol Invictus on his coin, and he was supposed to be the Christian emperor that mixed, that established Christianity. Well, put the stamp on Christianity. I put it that way. There was things that happened before that was already mixing this stuff together way back then, but he's the one that put the stamp on it. And we can see his art there, right? Constantine's art, and he has the god Sol Invictus up there on the right at the bottom corner. So his coin at the top, that's his coin. He got Sol Invictus, but he says he's a Christian. Why he keeps on putting all this Sol Invictus God everywhere, right? And then you can see his Sunday law, where he forced people that all judges in the city and city people and the ordinances shall, and the craftsmen shall rest upon the venerable day of the sun. Venerable, why is that capitalized? Because he basically worshiped sun god, Sol Invictus. So Mithra too. Yeah, actually Mithra is another name of Sol Invictus. It's the ancient name of Sol Invictus. So we can see something's going on, right? We got some issues going on in our belief system. And as you heard, even the black Jewish guy that did the Black History video, he even talked about how slaves were forced to take on Christianity. And I'm not against the Bible part of Christianity. It's the pagan part I'm concerned about, right? Because I still believe in the Bible. I'm Messianic. I believe in the Messiah. I believe in the Bible. I believe, we're supposed to go through the Messiah. I believe in Genesis all the way to Revelation. But I don't believe in the pagan customs. That same thing that Yah was rebuking his people because they were still serving him, but they was just mixing these sun god worship all along with them. And that's the reason why they got kicked out of the land. That's the reason why they continue to have problems. That's the reason why I feel like the transatlantic slave trade happened, right? Because we continue to go away from Yahweh, even colonization of Africa, because we continue to reject him instead of coming towards him. All right, so next. All right, so I'm about finished. Give me a couple more minutes here. But we can see that even this reform, this covenant, things happen after the Attila. So even after Attila took over and did all the bad things that she did, there was another restoration of the covenant. So we see in verse 13, when Attila heard the noise of the garden of the people, she came to the people in the house of Yahuwah. She looked, and behold, the king was standing by the pillar according to the custom, with the captains and the trumpeters beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced and blew trumpets. Then Attila tore her clothes and cried out, treason, treason. So she knows she was caught. And Joad, the priest, commanded the captains of hundreds who were appointed over the army and said to them, bring her out between the ranks, and whoever follows her put to death with the sword. For the priest said, let her not be put to death in the house of Yahuwah. So they seized her, and when she arrived at the horse's entrance of the king's house, she was put to death there. Then Joada, I don't know why can't say that, made a covenant between Yahuwah and the king and the people, that they would be Yahuwah's people, and also between the king and the people. So he made a renew the covenant. So we can see this renewed covenant happening over and over and over again. And all the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore it down. And his altars, his images, they broke it into pieces, threw it and killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars, and the priests appointed officers over the house of Yahuwah. He took the captains of hundreds and the Karites and the guards of all the people of the land, and they broke the king down from the house of Yahuwah and came by the way of the gate of the guards to the king's house and sat on the throne of the king. And he sat on the throne of the king. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, for they had put Attila to death with the sword at the king's house. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. So they reestablished the one grandson that didn't die. He became king. But the priest was the one, I think Joadad was the one that actually made the covenant. So we can see that this restoration has to happen, right? So we can see people that we're doing stuff that's wrong. Why not try to get it what's right? So that's why I have much respect, even for some black Christian churches. When they read the Bible, they went up there and they read through it, and they found out the Sabbath was on Shabbat. The Shabbat was on Friday to Saturday, and they changed, right? It was that easy. So they took the time, they researched. In the same way, what about our history? Why don't we got people that got 20 deacons, 50 ministers, 20 elders, and you can't find one person that can go and research this stuff and talk to people? That's an issue. But yet we can see that Jewish people are interested in our history and trying to understand, but we're not interested in our history. That's a problem. I think that's a problem. So, I think it's time for us to get it right, right? It's a time of repentance that we must do as a people. It's one thing, as I always say, there's Europeans that want to do this because this is their culture. Euro-Americans, if they want to do that's fine, right? But us, what is our culture? What is our heritage? We were forced to, in slavery, to adopt this, right? So I'm not saying get rid of the Bible. I'm not saying go to no Egyptian gods. It's very interesting that many churches will take in Greek, customs with frats and sororities, and they be okay with that, okay with Masons, right? But when it comes to our heritage, talking about who we are as a people, they want to kick that out. No, we don't want to hear that, right? We don't even want to touch that. Why not? If even Jewish people are talking about it, if Israeli news is talking about African Americans being connected to the lost tribes, why aren't we saying this, right? Why aren't we talking about these conversations, right? Why are we looking at it as anti-Semitic just because we're trying to find our heritage and our history, right? And there's other people, Jewish people out there who care about us that's trying to help us. A Jewish woman helped me get some information together. And I was shocked because I was told, oh, Jewish people hate you and all that stuff. And I'm talking to this woman. She was like trying to give me all this information about all these black Jews. So some stuff that we saw that was up there. So I don't identify with individuals saying, oh, I hate these people, I hate those people. That's not the hate them. That's not what the way we should be going about it, right? Our governments, even in America, some people don't like the way our government's about to go, but we still benefit from this government, living here in America. You ever go through another country and live there for a while, get caught like we did in COVID in Ghana, you appreciate the health care of America and some of the stuff that is done here. But the thing about it is, are we going to depend upon the health care and the government, or are we going to depend upon Yah? So where does Yah wants us to go going forward? So, there's some people that don't want to go. It's just like those Hellenized Jews that was trying to kill Paul. They were the same people, but they were caught into the culture, the assimilated culture that they got in those other nations. They didn't want to go forth. So there's going to be some people in our own community that's like that. But Yah is going to do the reckoning. He's going to allow the wheat and the tares to grow together, right? And he's going to separate them. So we need to do whatever we can while it's still day, because night cometh. It's hard to work during night, right? We can see darkness happening around us and things. Laws are changing against African Americans and different people of descent. The UN program around, I can't remember exactly, around African slavery just ended last year, right? To protect, people of the slave trade. And so what does that mean for us now? So people aren't looking at this stuff. It's very important for us to understand. So next, let me not keep on going on. So Josiah, he returned also to the government, right? So even Josiah, he did a change when he was a king. And then he says the king sent and they gathered him all the elders of the community. Where's our elders? The people that's trying to stand up and do what's right. Now I hold them accountable. It's just not about the pastors and the preachers, it's the elders. You're supposed to be teaching your children, your grandchildren. Are you teaching them right? Do you even care about their soul? You just want to make them happy, right? Making them happy is just like I said, that little bad child flipping on the couch and doing all kind of stuff. It's the elders that should be calling our people forward, right? To say, hey, you're doing wrong. get your children in check. This is our heritage, this is our custom, this is our history, and we're it's getting taken out of school. So we can't even teach about Black history like we want to in school, right? Because they want to take it out. So the elders know the stuff, right? They know the history. Are they passing it down from generation to generation? So the elders are accountable too. So if we want to get it right, the elders got to be a part of this. It can't be just a whole bunch of young people running around on the street corner. Where's our elders, right? So the king sent, and they gathered to him all the elders of Judea and of Jerusalem. The king went up to the house of Yahuwah, and all the men of Judah, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of Yahuwah. They lost the book of the covenant. They lost it, and they had to refine their own book. So we've lost our book, right? A lot of people only read what they call the Old Testament. We lost our customs. They used to tear, like I said, the slave Bible, tear stuff out of the Bible so we wouldn't read it. And now we can with an app, and we don't, right? We don't understand our heritage. Then verse 3, then the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before Yahuwah to walk after Yahuwah, to keep his commandments and his testimonies, his statutes with all his heart, all your heart, and with all your soul, to carry out the words of this covenant that were written in this book, talking about way back Moses, the first 5 books, Torah, and all the peoples entered into the covenant, right? Then the king commanded Hilkiah, the high priest, and the priest of the second order, and the doorkeeper, to bring out the temple of all the vessels that was made for Baal and for Asherah. So he had to clean out the temple, right? So it's just like these churches, we got to clean out some of that paganism, right? We got to get that stuff out of our Black churches, right? Become the people that he wants us to be, or even in our Muslim places. There's some paganism in Muslim, it's Islam. There's paganism there, right? There's paganism in Judaism. We got to clean that stuff out, right? And be the people that he wants us to be. And he burned them outside of Jerusalem in the field of Kedron, and carried their ashes to Bethel. So the house of Yah, once again. Keep on going back to the house of Yah. I won't keep reading all this for the sake of time, but you can see that they even have the houses of male cult prostitutes, right? Male cult prostitutes. I won't go there today, but you know what I'm saying. So let's go to the next. This is just more of his reform that he did. A lot of things that he continued to do. He cut down the pillars. He was just getting all that paganism out of the house of Yah, out of the nation of the people, right? So not saying that we should go around killing people or nothing. I know how people like to twist your words. I'm not saying none of that. I'm saying that it starts with your own house. What paganism you got in your house and your family and your situation. And then once you start getting that out, the next person will start getting out. And that's how we rising as a people. Now it's forcing some of those other people in those religious communities to recognize, right? So now they're fighting against Black Hebrew Israelites. And I'm like, is that your main focus right now? Is the people that's trying to believe in the Bible and stuff? That's your main focus. Not all the other stuff that has broken out into the church now, right? They're okay with that. But they want to fight against people that's trying to at least seek the Bible. Now, some of them got some strange customs. I don't agree with everything, but I think that's the least of our troubles right now. People trying to seek the Bible when people are going the other way around with it. You got Greek frats, even Pastor here locally. I think Pastor Wooden, he even spoke against some of the Greek frats and stuff coming into the church, and he knew something was wrong with that. We got Orisha, what's the thing? Kwanzaa. Got the red candle, right? We start doing stuff like that. I think it's Shango, the god of thunder. And we still not doing the thing that Yah has called us to do, which is very easy. It's just believe in the Bible and seek him. We want to create all these other customs and all these other things and worship all and include all this other worship instead of just keeping to what he told us to do, which is just clear cut. And, people over in, you even hear us talking to the Limba tribe, how it's part of their culture, even unto this day. So it's important for us to understand where we are. Not that we're trying to go and be any other tribe in Africa. We're not just trying to be Limba. We're trying to be Israelites, right? The Limba came from Israel. They were even kicked out of Israel, and they trying to go back to their original customs. They even been broken up, and you'll hear how they have been separated. They even trying to go back. So even the West African Israelites, the Ewe, they'll tell you, some of their stuff is pagan, right? So it's all of us going back, trying to go back. African Americans, Afro Caribbeans, All the people, Barbadians, all of us need to go back and seek Yah, right? Like he told us to do originally. And then we'll see how great he is and how he protects his people, just like he promised in his covenants. All right. So I think next. Oh yeah, because even now they weren't even celebrating Passover, right? They had to go back and find it in the book, right? And they said, surely such a Passover has not been celebrated from the days of the judges who judged Israel. So they had to even reinstitute some of the things that they had, overlooked. And now they're in Israel. They're actually in Jerusalem. So, we can see how he made all these reforms to get the people back. But now, what do we do now when we see our nation and our people hurting? Do we make the same spiritual reforms to turn back to him, right? To do the things that's right? So it said, however, Yahuwah did not turn from the fierceness of his great wrath with his anger burn against Judah because of all the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him. So Manasseh was the one king that did all this wickedness and stuff among Judah. And guess what? After all that wickedness, he repented. He made it to the kingdom. But yet his sin still carried over from generation to generation. Even the wrath of Yah was still burned against his people all the way during this time that I think even Josiah died because of the wrath that he had against Manasseh. So, it just shows the generational things that we need to come out of. And if we don't, we're in trouble because our problem is not with Europeans. It's not with Jewish people. It's not with Africans. Our problem is with Yah. He's the one that we have the problem with, and he will take care of all the rest if we get in line with him. All right, so next, let me see. So that's the scripture that I read in Jeremiah 50:4-5. In those days and at that time, declares Yahuwah, the sons of Israel will come, both they and their sons of Judah as well. They will go along weeping as they go, and it will be Yahuwah their Elohim they will seek. They will ask for the way to Zion, turning their faces in this direction. They will come that they may join themselves to Yahuwah in a everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. We know we haven't got that everlasting covenant with him, even though he's giving it to us. When are we going to take on to our side of it, right? He's holding on to it, but are we going to ever go back to embrace it? Just like all our forefathers, when they found that we went too far, they knew there was a turning back, right? So this is the time of us to turn back to the things, to show our dedication back to Yah. So we're accountable. We're accountable for this generation that we're living in. Do we turn back to him, or do we still continue to practice the paganism that we've been doing for all these generations that has gotten us nowhere, right? So next slide, is that the end? Oh, this is Nehemiah. I'll skip over this one. But he had to do the same thing. When he rebuilt the wall, he had to renew the covenant once again. So next, let me see if I can find it. So he talked about the whole story of what happened and how they got to that point. So we actually will save this for next time. So we'll do that next time. We'll go back to, and then we also next time we'll talk about what does it mean? What does that new covenant mean now? Right? Like we hear about the new covenant in Jeremiah, in the old covenant. Everybody wants to call the Old Testament the old covenant. So we can see in the Old Testament, we have the new covenant in the Old Testament where it was established and talked about. So what does that mean from, on the other side of Yahusha, right? So even that same covenant is even being talked about in Hebrews. So are we looking at Hebrews from that same perspective? And I guarantee you that majority of black Christians today don't even know that the new covenant is found in Jeremiah 31:31. They don't know that, right? They're just looking at it from a New Testament standpoint, but it's only one testament. That's why I say it's the foundation that he established was there, and then what he's fulfilled through Yahusha, right? Because it says that all scripture was written because of him. All right. So any questions online? All right. So let us get up and pray. And make sure you continue to look about the covenants in our life to try to be restored back to him. It's very important for us to understand our culture, but it's more important to understand our relationship with him, which our culture leads us to. Because as we can see that even though they had the culture, that they still went astray. And many of our people now are so far astray, caught up in religion and not in relationship. So let us pray. Dear Yah, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all the things you're doing in our life. Help us to wake up in this time of, hearing all this stuff about despair and aliens and all the stuff that's around us. And people are caught up more in that than caught up in your word. Help us to take a step back and to do what's right in your sight, to love you, to be a light into the nations, and not get caught up in the hate, because we don't want you to get caught up in the hate that you have for our abominations. Help us to do what's right. Allow you to put vengeance on those that come against us as we try to make peace and try to get back an atonement back with you through your son, Yahusha. Forgive us of our sins. Forgive us our ancestors' sins. Forgive us even our children's sins. The generations that have came from us that we misdirected, even in our misalignment with you. We ask you to help us to line up. Call forth our elders to stand forth and to do what's right, to see the truth and live the truth, so other people will come to an understanding. If our elders that push our families forward do right and change and love you, then of course the children and the grandchildren will fall in line as well. But we respect our elders in our community. So help our elders to start with a turning towards you and not being in a state of fear to speak up for who we are and who you are to us. We ask you to help the parents to step up, to be that generation that makes that change for our children, to love you as Josiah did, as we hear Nehemiah has done, and so many people of your word that turned and tried to do what's right, even in a time of despair, and how you bless them. And you remember the things that they have done, and you remember the covenant that you have given to our ancestors, even though we have broken it. We ask you to help us to understand the new covenant that you have for us, and help us to restore through your son and to seek him and seek you like never before. Bless us in our bodies and our minds and our souls, and be with us until we're able to meet again. Rise up your nation of people and help us to always remember you and what you have done for us, and how you said you're married to us, even until the time where we meet you as the bride, to dwell with you forever. We love you and we praise you. In Yahushua HaMashiach's name we pray. Hallelujah. Amen.